Welcome back to Under Pressure. Today, I'm very excited to have Jay Hawreluk with us from AcuMax. Jay is going to talk to us about how you can leverage AcuMax in your business in all facets and take it to the next level.
Hi, Jake. Good to see you again. And thanks so much for having me on your podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know I really appreciate it. I'm excited to get all this information about AcuMax and everything in your head to our audience. Jay and I met in Texas at Pivot Point, an event that BirdFlow was holding. And we shared a lot of ideas and had some great conversations. And I learned a lot from Jay. So, Jay, I'm so excited to have you share everything about AcuMax today.
Definitely will. You let me know. Where would you like me to start?
So let's start with my introduction to AcuMax. So the first time I had heard of AcuMax, I took a test or an assessment. Sorry, I took an assessment, two assessments actually, and one of them was the Acumen, and the other one's the AcuMax Index. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what I was so surprised by is when I got the results back from these assessments, how accurate they were. When you take personality tests for jobs, often you don't get much out of it, and they kind of put everyone in little boxes, and you usually can't leverage that in your business too much. So I had been familiar with like Myers-Briggs and DISC assessment, and I'd never really gotten too much out of those. And so I was very skeptical when I first took Jay's test assessments and got into the nuts and bolts of it and learned about it. And then the more I read on it, the more I got into it, and the more I learned from Jay. I was so impressed with not only what this tells you about yourself, but how you can apply this to your business, to hire better, to relate with people better and converse and just deal with people in a more effective way. And so, Jay, I'm hoping you could shed some light on what exactly those assessments are, and then we'll get into what that can do for you.
Well, the AcuMax Index is a personality assessment that's not a personality assessment. We're clumped into that arena. Most personality assessments are based upon social sciences or observable behavior. And ours is based upon, the neurosciences. Mm-hmm. So let me explain. In the 18 to 24 month period after any human being on the planet is born, certain chemicals come together in the brain and they create specific neural pathways. Now, during this time period, there are millions of pathways that are created, but we measure 4 as they apply to business and relationships, because let's face it, business is relationships.
Yeah.
So we measure nature. This occurs in any individual. So people in the audience that maybe have kids, a good chance they went through the terrible twos. The terrible twos are because that's when your wiring pattern is the purest. It hasn't been inundated with external input. So what are external inputs? Well, where I'm born, a culture, nationality of where I'm born can have an impact on how I behave. Upbringing is very strong because that, parents or the adults that are raising us is very strong in the beginning. Education can change personality and behavior, age and maturity. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me, Jay, the older you get, the smarter I'll become. And there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
Life's experiences, all the good and the bad things that have happened to us over our lifetime change personality and behavior. And one of the unique aspects of humans is we can short-term change our personality and behavior. It's why every client we've ever dealt with has at some point in time hired the next greatest rock star, only to find out 3 months later or maybe sooner that they have a rock.
Yeah.
Because I know this comes as a bit of a shock to everybody here, but people can fib in the interview process. One of my favorite quotes was that if all the productivity improvements in resumes were actually occurring, we'd have 10% GDP growth annually, and that job interviews can be Academy Award-winning performances. So this is a deep dive into an individual. The beauty of it is it never changes. Only under extreme and rare situations, maybe a closed head injury, brain surgery, where the brain's forced to rewire. rewire itself.
Yeah.
With 99.99% of the population, that's not going to be an impact. So it gives you a really deep dive into an individual, which is critical. All right. So that's the AcuMax Index. Now, the Acumen is our cognitive skills assessment. Cognitive skills simply tell us how quickly a person can grasp, retain, and utilize new information. Everybody eventually can. A good example of that is driving. Most people can drive. Of course, there's a lot of bad drivers out there. But what's the value of knowing this? Well, you may bring somebody into your organization and they may learn at a slower rate. Doesn't mean you exclude them, but maybe you slow down the onboarding process. Or on the flip side, maybe they learn at a faster rate. So you want to speed that process up to avoid them being, bored. So we measure two aspects of a person: their innate wiring, the environment they best thrive within, and then their cognitive abilities, how quickly they can learn, grasp, retain, utilize new information.
Absolutely. And from these assessments, when I first met Jay, he had taken a peek at my assessment, and wow, it was like he was Sherlock Holmes, just deducing the way I thought and the way I interacted with people based off my assessment. Is that right?
Well, yeah, we get business Kreskin all the time, and because it's just, we know how to read the results. Mm-hmm. And how the assessment works is it's a psychometric tool. And psychometrics are things you simply respond to. There could be, in marketing, they've used psychometrics for years. Psychometrics can come in visuals, can come in words, can come in colors, can come in smells. Perfume and cologne is a real good example of a psychometric. Somebody walks by and you go, wow, that smells good. The next person walks by, you're gagging, but they think they smell good, So it's a psychometric assessment. It's extremely hard to fudge. And it's a deep dive into an individual. And the reason it's so accurate is that's your innate wiring. Yeah. It does not change.
Absolutely. And I totally understand it after having so many great conversations with you. But I think what we have to do so that people can really understand what this looks like is, if you don't mind, I would love to share my assessment and then have you break it down and show people what it looks like and what this means.
Absolutely.
All right. So I will share that in a moment. But while I'm getting that up, I'd love, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear a little bit about the story of AcuMax and how this all came to be. How did you found this company?
Well, what's interesting is I, quite by accident, 22 years ago, fell into the personality assessment arena. I was actually working for a lean manufacturing company, and I was pretty much the liaison between the company and senior leadership. The issue at this company, though, is they had a very poor behavioral department. It was pretty much, the beatings will continue until morale improves. So I went looking for an alternative, and during that time of looking, I talked to a company, and they made me an offer, and so I said, well, what the heck, So I got into this arena 22 years ago. Mm-hmm. During my time with the other company, I was very successful. I was one of their top consultants, but there were things that were being relayed that didn't make sense. So I started to explore into this. At the same time, I became very interested in the neurosciences. And one of the shifts you're seeing that occurring right now is moving away from the behavioral science and personality and moving to the neurosciences. So I became very enamored with the neurosciences. And as I kiddingly say, from dealing with clients, hanging around with entrepreneurs, I got the bug myself. And so I decided to leave that company and create the AcuMax Index. Now, I had a 1-year non-solicitation that I honored. I highly recommend you do that. But during that time, it allowed me to fine-tune things, research, go into individuals, and I interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. They would take it. I would put everything now is auto-generated through our software. I would put it all together by hand. And then we had the assessment validated. Now, what's a statistical validation? It simply states, do we measure what we say we're going to measure? Mm-hmm. And statistical validation is very important if you're going to use an assessment as part of the pre-screening process, which we can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
Secondarily, we have to be EEOC compliant. That means that we don't bias toward or against any protected class. Mm-hmm. So we launched the company, kiddingly, no revenues, no clients, no nobody. And I'm sure many in the audience can relate to that. And we've grown throughout the years. We're used now in pockets of Europe. We're used in Asia. We're used in Africa, South America, North America. And people, when they find it, just say the same thing you did. This is just so accurate. It is just me. And the beauty of it is people, it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It just is. But when you understand how somebody is wired, it takes away what I call people clutter.
Yeah.
And people clutter is the thing with employees, direct reports, coworkers, customers. Those are the things that can drag on business, and they can actually, remove effectiveness. So understanding how people are wired gives you great insight, not into yourself, but dealing with others. And then also helping businesses align the right talent in the right role. The reality of it is standard hiring gives you about a 40% hit rate. That means 4 out of every 10 people that the average business hires perform as expected from date of hire. That means 60% do not. So a lot of companies, they have a couple of A players, they have a couple of B players, they have a group of C players. They're not happy with the C players, but they kind of, what are we going to do? So we do everything with analytics and data. There's no gut, there's no subjective. So we do everything with analytics and data. So if I want another Jake, I know his wiring, so I know exactly what to go get,
Yeah.
So that gives you kind of a little basics about I got into it. I've had lots of aha moments over the years.
I'm sure.
Of things that have happened to me in my lifetime and reflection back into my life, why things happened the way they did once I got involved in this. And it's truly fascinating. One of my consultants asked me one day, do you ever get tired of reading results to somebody? I said, absolutely not.
Oh, no.
I always enjoy the reaction.
Yeah, and I can tell. I could tell how excited you were when you were sharing all of the results with everyone at the Pivot Point event. And that's why I'm excited to get into showing my assessment so that people can see, all right, what does this look like? And then how can this be applied to the business, whether it's hiring, whether it's building out a team. There's so many great applications for this that I'm excited to get into it. So I'm going to share my screen. And as I do that, one last thing, Jay actually has a special offer that he would like to offer the group. Would you like me to share that with them, or do you want to share that?
Please do. It's special for Jake and all of you viewers.
All right. So anyone in the audience who's curious, wants to take a look at AcuMax and see what all this hubbub is about, what I'm so excited about here, you can text Jake to 1-218-517-7985. I'm going to put the number in the caption, but again, you text Jake to 218-517-7985. I'll put it all in the caption, but please go check that out. I highly recommend it. That is, if they do that, text that, they get a link to do an assessment at no cost, right, Jay?
Absolutely. You get a link through the text. It takes about 5 minutes to complete the assessment. And depending on the volume we have, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to get your results. But you'll get a PDF that will explain the basics of your reporting. And it's just our give back to the audience. So I hope people take advantage of it. It'll be quite an aha moment for you.
Oh, absolutely. It would be. And it was for me. And you're about to see why. So for anyone who is listening on the audio formats, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anything like that, you're not going to be able to see this, but Jay does such a good job describing it that you'll be able to picture it yourself. But if you want to, you can go to our YouTube. This will be on both the Inspection Pros channel and the Under Pressure channel. This episode's going out to both for the pressure washing community and for the home inspection community. So if you can't see it, go hop on the YouTubes. You'll be able to find it. So Jay, what are we looking at here?
Well, okay. The output has two graphs on it.
Mhm.
All right. The top graph is your natural self. That is your innate mental wiring that sets at around 24 months.
Mhm.
All right. The second graph, adjusted self, is a rear view mirror of the prior 90 days of your life. The adjusted self tells us how people are trying to adapt to their environment, what changes they're going through, if they're undergoing stress, if they're energized or de-energized by their environment. Now, we won't go into organizations and we'll see 95% of people that are de-energized. It doesn't mean they don't like their job. What it means is they're not getting the appropriate amount of their motivators. All right. So your top graph, the natural self, from these dots, and I'm going to read them in just a second, but it tells me Jake's orientation to ideas, how he communicates, which is not talk or think, but successfully process thought, his work style, how he handles pressure, how he prioritizes things, how much risk he'll make in decision making, how much flexibility he wants in his environment, where he gets his self-confidence, how he best learns. So you have all of this information in a quick 5-minute assessment. So that's when we can go into after I talk about how what the dots say. That's why it can be used in the hiring process, the onboarding process, how to effectively coach people, how to set goals, and give feedback to an individual, how they make decisions. So it's a wealth of information in a couple of quick minutes.
I was so surprised when I got the report back. It wasn't just this. To the audience, you have to understand there's pages of how you interact with people, how to hire, how to coach them. It even says interview questions to ask specific people. So this isn't just it. And Jay, I was so surprised that what you just said, the wealth of knowledge, just made me think, wow, yeah, there really was a wealth of knowledge you get back from this report.
Yeah, just for the audience, you'll be getting your natural and adjusted self graphs, drive intensity, which is the natural self, effective engagement, the environment you best thrive within, what the adjusted self report is, or read, and how to best interact with me. So we do pare it down a little bit because of volume. It would probably take 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour. But if you ever want additional information, you please feel free to contact support at AcuMax Index. That's where everything will come from. Mm-hmm. By the way, if you do take it and you don't get the results, please check your spam folder. But it's support, SUPPORT, at AcuMax, ACUMAX, Index, INDEX.com.
All right.
So
thank you.
Now I'll explain how it's set up.
Yeah.
So in the natural self on the left, you see RL of 52. RL means response level. So Jake selected 52 words. That creates the green line you see in the middle there. All right. It's unique to Jake. And so every time you take it, it's unique to you as an individual. So dots to the right are what we call high. Dots to the left are what we call low. And each of the dots correlates to the A, B, C, D, or TF in the right. All right. So just to give you a thumbnail on this, I want to step aside and say, really, to fully understand everything AcuMax can do and all the power is about an 8-hour workshop.
Yeah.
There's that much information. We don't have 8 hours today, but I'm going to try and give everybody a real good impact of what it is. So A is what we call, well, before we do this, I'm going to read Jake. Okay.
All right.
Jake is motivated by the opportunity for face-to-face people interaction. He likes positive encouragement and the offer of help. Though he may not always take that offer, he does enjoy it. He's also motivated by freedom and autonomy, the ability to do things his own way. He thrives best in an environment that has variety, where he can pivot and switch gears. He likes flexibility in his environment. And although Jake may come up to somebody and tell them an interesting, fascinating 5-minute story, when you come up to Jake and he's busy, he wants the critical points of information relayed quickly. So there's a little snapshot on Jake.
And imagine my shock when I sit down for lunch with Jay in Texas and he's just explaining myself to me better than I could explain myself.
Well, that's one of the beauties is it gives not only the why, but it also gives a great language to communicate with individuals. So I'm going to go through the A, B, C, D real quickly here, and then I'll get to the TF.
Please do.
So A is what we call autonomy. All right. What it measures is idea flow in an organization. When the A is to the right, high in the A, that's Jake, high in the A. Those are individuals that prefer their way of doing things best. You know who you are out there, all right? Most engage with ideas with their thumbprint on it, the ability to tweak it, change it, will be more actively assertive in defending their ideas and plans of action. Now, when the A is on the other side of the norm, to the left, low in the A, those are individuals that prefer options in decision making. They want to know what's best for the team or organization. They prefer more harmony and accord in the work environment. They want less conflict, all right? Not good, not bad, not right, not wrong, but is. So from the idea flow perspective, in most organizations, the higher A's have a tendency to impose their way onto the lower A's. We have to remember, all people are free-thinking beings. All people have ideas. It doesn't matter if your A is all the way to the right, if your A is all the way to the left. It doesn't matter. It's how I value them. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we can teach is idea flow in organizations, how to let everybody contribute. In addition to that, there are roles in an organization where you want a higher A. There are roles in an organization where you want a lower A. Here's the funny thing about humans. It's our ability, and hey, Jay, can you play along with me real quick on this one?
Absolutely.
All right. So let me ask you some questions and then answer honestly. Would you want to work on an assembly line?
No.
Could you do the work if you had to? You had bills to pay, family to support.
Probably.
All right. More importantly, could you sell yourself as a pretty decent assembly line worker just to get the job in the interview?
Probably.
Yeah. All right. But what would you be thinking every single day when you walked into that job?
Oh, I got to do the same thing over and over again.
Would you consider it a long-term career move?
Oh, no.
What would you be doing when you weren't at work?
Anything else? Another hobby, maybe a side hustle.
Or more importantly, probably looking for another job.
Yes. Yeah, that as well.
The reason I bring this up is because this is what happens to business owners each and every day. They interview somebody and they interview well. And so, Jake, do you want to work on this? And I've lived my whole life to work on this. This is the job. I love the job. And Jake, by his nature, could sell himself. I'm going to tell you that right now. He can sell himself. And so, but he would be unhappy. And that's usually what creates, when you have an unhappy employee, they're not a fit for the role. They are usually either problem children or turnover in organizations. As a matter of fact, Gallup warned us of this great resignation over 10 years ago. They did a survey and they said 70% of the U.S. workforce was disengaged from their jobs. And there's two reasons. Number one, I'm not a wiring fit, putting Jake into the assembly line. Mm-hmm. All right. Number two, maybe I'm a wiring fit for the role, but I'm not properly motivated and coached.
Yeah.
So, let's say I hire Jake and he's a great wiring fit for the role, but then I micromanage him to death. Then, Jake, tell me how you're going to react to me micromanaging every move you make.
Not well.
Not well.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know how exactly I would react now, but in the past, I probably would shut down and not be able to get through too much work.
Well, that's exactly right. And this is why. We don't have stamped on our foreheads, the little read I did on you earlier. You don't have that stamped on your foreheads. But this gives us so much data and information. All right. I'm going to get into BCD in just a second, but you see there's W's, for all of Jake's drives. And you'll notice on the reports when you get them, you'll see an L you'll see a W or an N. Now, you could be all L's, you could be all W's, you could be all N's, you could be any combination of L, W, and N. This simply means like, want, or need. Do you like something? Do you want something? Do you need something? So in Jake's case, he's high in the A. He wants an environment where he can act and generate on his own results his own way. He wants an environment of freedom and independence. He wants an environment where he can have his thumbprint and his input on ideas and plans of action. All right. Now, one of the beauties of the instrument is everything's an opposite. So what the high side likes, the low side's not so crazy about. What the low side likes, the high side's not so crazy about. So that just gives you a little snippet into the A. And again, there's jobs where I want a high A. There's jobs where I want a low A.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So let's go. Do you have any questions, Jake, as we're going through this?
So I don't, but I know that some of the audience members may have questions. So if you do have questions and you're listening, check out the assessment. And again, I can bring up that number for you. But also reach out to Jay, reach out to me, and let me get you in touch with Jay. Let's see if we can get these questions answered, because I'm sure the audience will have some questions.
Absolutely. Well, in my organization, we have a rule. The only bad question is the question that's not asked.
Agreed. I love that.
So the B drive is communication. All right. Everybody talks. Everybody thinks. But this is how I process thought. Now you'll notice Jake's B is to the right. He's what we call high in the B. Jake is a verbal thought processor. So this is how it works. As Jake is verbalizing, he's also developing ideas and plans of action. But it can be confusing to others at times because with high Bs, Jake may say, well, I'm thinking about turning right and it's the reasons. I'm thinking about turning left. Maybe we should go straight. As he's verbalizing, he's actually developing thought. All right. Another residual effect of high Bs like response from people. When they ask a question or make a statement, they like response. They like replies. All right. Now, the B on the other side, low in the B, those people talk, those people think, but I process thought differently. How the brain works for low B is I listen to everything that's going on, then my brain kind of sifts through it, gets rid of the unimportant stuff, focuses on the meat, and then concentrates. Now, if you ask a low B a question, if it's something they know cold, they'll just answer it. But if it's something that's new and unknown, they do best with time to think an important issue through. If they don't have that opportunity to think it through, they'll never buy in. You know, many of you in the audience have probably experienced what we call the meeting after the meeting. So you have a big meeting, you decide everything. Then the next day, a person walks in and says, I was thinking about that meeting. And I'm not so sure I'm on board with this or this or this. All right. Well, it's normally because the individual needs to think it through to buy in. Buy-in is critical. Now, you can be authoritative in an organization and just say, do it this way. But when you can engage people, because the number one thing all employees want is to self-empowerment. So when you can engage them, and then you understand the techniques to use. What ends up happening with the high B and the low B is the high B makes a statement. The low B starts thinking about it and doesn't respond. The high B then starts to repeat themselves to get a response. As the high B is verbalizing more to get their response, it's stopping the low B from thinking. So it can be a very vicious cycle that goes round and round.
Absolutely.
Right.
That just shows the power of being able to leverage this assessment and say, all right, this vicious cycle could happen, but let's avoid it by being aware. You're arming yourself with tools here, with dealing with each other within your team, within your organization, by understanding how people are wired, right?
Absolutely. I'm going to give everybody a coaching tip right now. If you're high in the B, like Jake, and you ask somebody a question, and they stare at you, what we call the blank processing stare, that's indicative of the thought process. And again, it's an important question. She's not, what do you want for lunch, or something they know cold. But on that, when you see that, high Bs don't say anything. And if you don't like the dead air, make up your own response. Hey, you need a minute to think about that? Low Bs, when you experience somebody repeating themselves after they've asked you a question, all right, you probably have a high B. So just give them a response. Hey, Jake, you make a great point. Let me noodle on that a little bit. Let me think about it. I can get back with you in a couple of hours. Okay? That takes away the clutter that occurs. You know, one of the examples I like to use is this, because it happens to everybody. You know, a high B is at the store, and the retail person says, dude, when do you want to take your washer and dryer? And they say, well, you know, man, I got a busy week here. Gosh, I'd like to get it before the weekend, but I got work responsibilities. I had stuff to do with the kids. I had this. I think Friday afternoon. I think I can squeeze it in Friday afternoon. And they'll do it just like that verbally. Low Bs have the same conversation, but guess where they have it? In their head.
Okay.
It's many of us have heard the old sales adage, you know, the person who speaks first loses. And that was definitely developed by a low B. All right. So here's that little trick. High Bs, when you see the stare, when you ask a question, don't say anything. Give your own response. You need time to think about it. Low Bs, if you see somebody repeating themselves, you know, give them a response. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Let me think about it. I'll get back with you. It's an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Now, there's roles for high Bs in organizations, and there's roles for low Bs in organizations. Okay. Quick little side story. One of my clients has become a very good friend of mine. His training was as a chemist, and he's high in the B. And usually chemists, by their nature, are low in the B. So his first job out of college, he got with this company, and after a couple of months, the employees were going to the owner going, this guy's driving me crazy, man. He's coming over, he's talking to me all the time. And, you know, so actually the owner pulled him aside and said, you know what? I know you're a chemist by nature and you have a great background, but I think there's a better role for you in the organization where you can be out interfacing with people using your knowledge. And he's been incredibly successful in his career. And he kind of goes back and he said, that was actually a big changing point. And he said, I didn't realize why I was irritating everybody, because the majority of the chemists there were low in the B. They were heads down. They were analyzing. He's high in the B. He's walking around, talking to people. And so that's very interesting about how you align with background and skill set.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
C drive is what we call patience. Now, the drives get their names from the high side. So Jake is low in patience. All right. That doesn't mean that sometimes he can't be patient, but his nature is to be more impatient. Well, characteristics of being more impatient is, well, I ask you, Jake, you do a things to do list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where do you start?
It depends. Usually at 1.
But it depends.
It depends.
Will you always go to 2 after 1?
No. Based on what I prioritize things as. If it needs to be timely or it's something I can crack out real quick.
Well, that's kind of an interesting concept with low Cs. By nature, we are more a juggler with our work activities. Yeah. So we'll do a things to do list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We may start on 27, hop back to 6, go to 4.
Yeah.
All right. We accept elements of pressure. We may not always like it, but we accept it. All right. We want to make a quick decision with all other drive needs taken care of. So the C drive, it's how I work. It's how I accept pressure. It's my speed of decision making. And actually, it's also our innate fuses. And I'll explain that in just a second. Now, high C, the opposite of Jake, those are individuals high in C. They prefer a sequential environment. They set their plan of action 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They start at 1, finish it, go to 2, finish it, go to 3, finish it. They like having a plan and following it in order.
Oh, yeah.
They will actually push back from pressure that they deem to be undue pressure. And I'll give a couple of examples, all right? So they're more deliberate decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the interaction of low C's and high C's. So a low C goes to a high C and says, hey, I need a decision on this. And the high C says, well, I can have it for you at 4 o'clock today. The low C is like, it's 9 a.m. in the morning, 4 o'clock. Oh my gosh, that's so much time. Why does it take so much time? So a low C decides they're going to speed things up a little bit. So I'm going to walk into the high C's office in an hour. I'll be texting them. I'll be calling them. I'll be going back into their office. I'll bug them 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times.
Yeah.
When it comes 4 o'clock, the high C's walk in and say, do you have a decision? The high C says, no. Well, why not? Well, if you hadn't interrupted me 17 times, I would have it. There's an example of the pushback.
I love that.
You've experienced most of these other drives in your life and your organization.
Oh, I'm sure everyone has. And just to the point, now that I'm thinking about it, after you described it a little bit more, I wouldn't start. You just asked me, Cole, I wasn't prepared for that question. Now, being prepared for that question of the LET checklist, I would probably start with whatever I deemed to be the most effective to reach my goal. Whatever in that checklist, whatever I thought, all right, if this is the mission, I'd go through the checklist and say, all right, number 12 is going to get me one step closer to our mission or closer than the other steps. And so I think that's what it is, being more task oriented, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really be more of a juggler. You answered it right. Sometimes I'll start at 1.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll start at 7. That's a very low C aspect. Actually, kind of one of the things that's kind of interesting we've noticed over the years is low C's will put the hardest thing at the top of the list, and they'll do all 47 things underneath it, hoping that it will magically fall off one day.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And so, that's what being a work juggler is. I'll set up things to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I may start on 27.
Yeah.
Because low C, I'm more impatient. I want to make a quick decision. I'm more impatient. I do accept elements of pressure, except I also put low C's put pressure on themselves and others.
Mm-hmm.
High C's are the exact opposite. And the reason is because of how the brain works. The high C brain is wired more for completion, which means if the high C is in the middle of doing something and then gets yanked away from it without the ability to button it down first, notice I didn't say finish, I said button down first, a residual part of their brain is still thinking about what they should have been completing.
Yeah.
There are high C roles in organization and there are low C roles in organizations. Actually, personality assessments, little history here, started after World War II with the U.S. military studying why certain people were successful as a fighter pilot. Certain people were successful as a bomber pilot. Fighter pilot is low C. I have to pivot, change. Bomber pilot is high C. I have an actual plan to follow. That was actually the birth of personality assessments many, many years ago.
That's so interesting. I love that.
And the C drive, it's how we work, accept pressure, speed of decision-making. I mentioned our innate fuse. Low C's, kiddingly, I like to do some jokes for things, but low C's, when we get irritated, we're like Old Faithful at Yellowstone National Park. We'll spit once a day. High C's, because they're more patient by nature, they're like Mount Vesuvius. When they finally explode, once every 3,000 to 4,000 years, they bury Pompeii in a mile of ash. It's kind of an interesting little thing. And usually what triggers it is pressure. Our tendency is to treat others the way we're wired.
Yeah.
That's what creates the disconnect with people over time.
And that's why I needed to bring this to the audience so they could understand how you can arm yourself with this to understand that you can't treat everyone and interact with everyone like they're yourself, because they're not. They have different wiring. And that's why we're here.
Absolutely. A good example of low C environment is an emergency room in a hospital. Unpredictable. You may have a certain number, you may have patients to take, but then somebody comes in, has been a gunshot victim or has a heart attack. They may take, higher priority than somebody who has a broken arm.
Yeah.
But surgery is high C. It's a process and steps to follow. It's not like, well, Jake, today you're going to have your gallbladder. We're going to come in through your ear this time. Just for fun. But you kind of see that. Jobs there's low C jobs and there's high C jobs in organizations. I want to make this comment. This is the most stressful drive to work against. A low C working in a high C environment gets bored. Mm-hmm. They lose focus. That can oftentimes create safety issues.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
A high C working in a low C environment feels pressure. They can make mistakes. So this is a real important aspect in aligning people with jobs. The beauty is we use analytics. So in an organization, when we walk in, they say, I want another Jake. I have the analytics. Who's going to be best for technicians? Who's going to be best in sales? Who's going to be best in this? We have a couple of ways of doing it. Number one, we can look at data of existing people that are successful in the organization. And if the position doesn't exist, then we can make it, through what we call the subjective position profile. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. One of my clients, yesterday I was on the phone with them. They're looking for an executive director for their organization. And so he brought together the search committee and they created a position profile subjectively. And then there's another executive director that works in a different organization. So we would like somebody just like him. So they went out, had him do the survey. All right. It matched what they created perfectly, which validated, because they're like, how do we know we created it right? Well, you want somebody like this person and you created it correctly.
Yeah.
And then it gave them a lot of insight into the candidates that they had. Mm-hmm. Because how we look at it from hiring is, are they wiring match? Then do they have the background and skill set? I may have a great wiring for the role, but if you're looking for an orthopedic surgeon and I don't have medical school training, could be a problem.
Oh, yeah.
So you want to go in those. Actually, a lot of skills can be taught. Obviously, medicine, you have to go to college, to medical school for it. But in the skilled trades, a lot of our clients are using this tool to train people. We do a lot of work in manufacturing and machining. The average age of a machinist is 60 years old. So they're finding people who have the wiring for it. Then they get on the acumen to see how quickly they learn, look at what their mechanical aptitude is, and are creating a whole new workforce. And the reason I bring this out is because the next big initiative in the next 10 years is for employers to be able to offer opportunities and train people for those roles.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Because a lot of clients say, well, we can't find people. You may not be able to, but you can find people.
Yeah.
We actually had a client many years ago. They were having a hard time getting salespeople. So what they did is they constructed the salesperson profile using the psychometrics. They created ads to attract them. And it was basically, hey, do you want to get involved in hospitality? We're going to teach you hospitality. We'll teach you all the aspects of it. And then you can become a salesperson for us. So they taught the background and skills necessary.
Interesting.
The residual effect of that, though, was as their competition found out about it, they wanted these individuals because they were highly trained and they knew they could sell. But then that comes into the key aspect of being able to motivate, to engage, and retain.
Yeah.
I'll do D drive. I know lots of information here.
So
D drive is what we call certainty. Now, this has nothing to do with intellectual learning.
Yeah.
Nothing. All right. It has everything to do with how much information I want for effective decision making. Mm-hmm. So Jake is low in the D. He wants the W, an environment that offers him flexibility. He wants the critical points of information, the summary sheet when people are proposing ideas to him. He wants less rules, regulations, and structure in his environment. When the D is on the other side, those are individuals who prefer quite a bit of information. And again, it depends the amount. Do I like the information? Do I want the information? Do I need the information? I want to know the rules, regulations, and structure of the organization. I want a lot of proof in decision making. Jake is a low D, can make decisions that make high Ds sweat, because he's more accepting of risk. Actually, lower D, because I don't need the information, I'm more accepting of risk in decisions. High D, because I do want the information, I'm going to be wanting to minimize it. Now, I want to make a point here. Everybody makes risk decisions. They just make them differently.
Yes.
That's a key. Many of the assessments say a person won't make a risk decision, or that's ridiculous. If somebody wouldn't make a risk decision, they wouldn't get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. You'd think so. Yeah. There's a scale. It's not binary.
It is. And there's roles where I want a low D in them, and there's roles that I want a high D.
Actually, that brings up something real quick. Sorry to interrupt here, but I'm curious. Is this something you deal with often, like telling people that, hey, this isn't binary. It's not just high and low. There's a scale in between. Is that something you have to talk about often?
Well, there's a scale and there's relationships. The scale, the like, want, need, the intensity factor of it. There's the relationships of the A and D, alpha and delta. There's the relationships of the A and B, alpha and bravo. There's the relationship of the C. When you use the C drive, the AD relationship, the AB relationship, those are the critical points that we use to create a profile for a job. Mm-hmm. And then people are matched to that. Green, yellow, red. Green's a go. Yellow's cautionary. Mm-hmm. Now, we have yellow in there because there's some cautionary individuals that'll work well. And we also realize it's a tighter employment market.
Yeah.
Red is a no-go. And I was talking with a prospective client. He's a member of a group. I was talking to him a couple months ago. And he said, a lot of members in this group use your instrument. And they all across the board said, yep, we violated the process. We've hired a red badge. How did it work out? We had to fire them. So we save you time and money and create clarity. And he was so intrigued. They become clients now. But he was just so intrigued by it. And that's one of the things we say. If you follow the process, you'll get great results. It's kind of like this. Jake, if you're not a fit for a role, no matter how much you're referred, no matter how much I like you, no matter how much we have common friends and interests, if you're not a fit for the role, I shouldn't bring you in. And one of my clients, she said it best. She said, when I don't hire somebody, I'm actually doing them a favor.
Yeah. Oh, it makes sense.
Because they're not going to have a bad impression of us, and we're not going to have a bad impression of them.
This kind of gives you like a sneak peek into the person's mind. Like, I feel like I've just shown an X-ray into my thoughts to the audience. And I'm totally comfortable with that because when I did meet you, Jay, what did you say? That I had the best wiring? And why is that?
I said that because you gotta love who you are.
Yeah.
Somebody who's the opposite of Jake, they gotta have the best wiring.
Oh, yeah.
You have to love who you are. Now, we all have strengths. We all have limitations, and for the audience, I'm wired like Jake.
Yep.
We're actually very similarly wired. But when I say that, you have a best wiring pattern. I say that to individuals all the time. You have to love who you are. Everybody brings a specialness to the organization. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has limitations. There's no good or bad wiring. The best wiring is who we need for a particular role.
And you're doing them a service. Like you said, you absolutely are. Why set people up to fail, essentially, if you can get this snapshot of someone's thought process and their wiring and say, all right, they would be set up for success in this role or they wouldn't be. And now you kind of know ahead of time, right? And that's fantastic. You're setting them up.
You're absolutely right. Turnover is costly for organizations. If turnover was a line item on financial statements, people would be shocked at the cost. The issue is a lot of these studies come out and say, well, a $25,000 employee is going to cost you $150,000 to replace, and people don't believe that because that's a little stretched out. But if you look at it like this, even if let's say they're a $25,000 a year employee, do you have the time of going through the interview process, checking references, people's time in interviewing, onboarding, And then, yeah, they may do the job for a little bit, and either they self-select out or you have to ask them to leave. Then you have to start the process again. It costs you money and it costs you time. Majority of our clients get a positive ROI with one hire.
Yeah.
And that's key. And the smaller the business, the more impactful the wrong hire becomes.
Oh, absolutely.
It was funny because we had a client that engaged with us a little bit. They taste tested it about a year and a half ago, and they decided they didn't need it. And then about 6 months later, they call us up and they say, I think we need you. Why? Well, we didn't think we did. We hired this guy. We thought he'd be great. We had to fire him after 4 months. So there's there's just the way it is. Standard hiring gives you a 40% hit rate. Doing this makes it about 85%. Now, it's not perfect. There's no perfect tool. Jay could have the right background. He could have the right skill set. He could have the right attitude. But if he's going out to the casino every night and staying out till 4 a.m., it's going to be really hard for him to be sharp and on the job at 7.
Absolutely.
So there can be these things. But if you hire to the right profile and then motivate them the right way, giving Jake freedom and autonomy to set his own goals, give him his thumbprint on things, allowing him to verbally discuss issues and problems through. It's going to engage him more. And having this data improves interactions across the board.
Yeah. So, Jay, I'm sorry to stop you for one moment. We are going to take a moment to hear a word from our sponsor, Pair Payments, and we'll be right back.
The home inspection industry is highly competitive, and you need an edge to stay on top. You certainly can't afford to give profit away for no reason. But what if I told you credit card processors may be overcharging you and robbing you of profits you've worked hard to earn? It's time to put an end to being overcharged for payment processing. It's time to take back your profits. That's why we've put together a free report, How to Avoid Being Overcharged by Your Payment Processor. Head over to takebackyourprofits.com, download the report, and put an end to being overcharged for credit card processing. You've worked hard for your sales, and you deserve to keep it. What are you waiting for? Go to takebackyourprofits.com and download your report today.
All right, and we are back. We are back with Jay from the AcuMax Index, who's discussing this in great detail for us today and giving us some great insight into the neural pathways here, how you can understand and how you can really use these to your advantage. So Jay, let's finish up with this, and then we're going to check out some overlays and get into some more detail.
I want to just talk about the red dot that you see here, the TF. That's called the tilt factor. What the tilt factor does is 2 things. Number 1, it's how I tilt in an ambiguous decision. Mm-hmm. 50% of the numbers say turn right. 50% of the numbers say turn left. What will tilt me? When the tilt is low, like it is with Jake, he will consider the subjective or the gut feel. When the tilt is high, that individual is going to be driven more by objectivity, more data. High tilts can make gut decisions, but as a client once said, I make that decision, but it kind of haunts me. All right. The second thing it does, it's innate approachability. Low tilts have lower space zone requirements than higher tilts, Yeah. So if your tilt factor's on the green line, it's like here, there's your zone. If it's lower, it's like this. If it's a higher, it's like this. So it can understand some of the differences. Now, we measure tilt in mild, fairly intense, very strong. So it can impact it. Now, you can have 2 identical wiring patterns with different tilt factor, and it actually changes the persona. Why? Low tilt warms the profile. High tilt cools the profile.
Yeah.
I do want to point out that about 2 to 3% of the time, the tilt factor can be an issue. It can be either way too low in a profile or way too high in a profile. Mm-hmm. Now, way too low or way too high would be 15 of those little notch marks you see.
Okay.
Jake's is just fine. But we do see that at times, and it does give added insight. As a matter of fact, we had a client and contacted us and said, I have this candidate. They have a good background and skill set, but I'm very, very concerned about the very low tilt.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked one of my consultants to sit in on the interview. The candidate started crying in the middle of the interview about how they wanted a job.
Wow.
Now, that's not really going to get you jobs. But it was so low, it just consumed her in emotion. And actually, she called back in the office and spoke to one of my other consultants, about it. Obviously, they didn't hire him. And they said, look, let's give you some coaching on this. And this is why. She goes, I can't control myself. I just want the job so much. I just cry and cry. Well, that's because her tilt was incredibly low. It'd be like all the way to the end of where your graph is, mm-hmm. all the way to the left. So it does give valuable insight. Every dot, every item in here gives valuable insight into people. Now, I do want to make a comment about adjusted self. You see, Jake, he's a little de-energized. De-energized is because he's not getting enough of his innate motivators. Mm-hmm. He's making some changes, a little bit minor, but he's not getting enough of his innate motivators, okay? So because he doesn't have it stamped on his forehead. So how do I energize Jake? Give him, more freedom, flexibility, and autonomy, opportunity to talk things through, really look at him from just a goal accomplishment perspective. Look at it like this. When you have motivators and you give them to somebody, it energizes the wiring pattern. It pumps somebody up.
Yeah.
It's like when you're hungry and you eat, it gives you energy. Unless, of course, you eat and then you have to go to a seminar and then you get sleepy in the afternoon. But yeah, it does give you energy. So motivators are food for the wiring pattern. They're food for the soul.
Yeah.
So when you understand these things. Now, another comment I do want to make about adjusted self. Jake's not making any changes. There's a little bit, when we talk about a serious change, it's when a dot goes from one side in the natural self to the other side in the adjusted self. So it'll be Jake's A going from high to low. Mm-hmm. The more of these drives that change position between natural and adjusted self, the greater elements of stress an individual feels. And stress can rear its ugly head mentally, emotionally, or physically. Now, there's good stress, having to meet a deadline, getting a job accomplished on time. Bad stress is when you try and change who you are. Years ago, I walked into an organization and I did a presentation for senior leadership. And one of the senior leaders there, he was completely changing who he was. From the top graph to the bottom, all four of the drives were changing. The highs were going to lows and adjusted. The lows in natural were going to high and adjusted. He was incredibly de-energized. I looked at him and I said, I really don't want to alarm you, but I'm a little concerned that you could be a candidate for a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
He looked at me and he said, how did you know I had a heart attack 6 weeks ago? I've just gotten back to work.
Wow.
And that's the power. I'm not saying everybody who's stressed is going to, but the stress has been going on for so long. I talked to him. I said, how long have you been trying to be this way? He said, 5 years. So much stress. And so, there again, stress can create physical issues, headaches, heart attack, upset stomach, mental issues where, you become fogged, or it's hard to think or clarify, and even to some elements, emotional issues, So there, like I said, it gives us an awful lot of information. That's all I really want to say about the adjusted self right now. And some of it that we're talking about here is why, a training class is 8 hours.
Yeah.
There's just so much value.
There's so much. And one thing I do want to bring up is I'm sure you see a lot of adjusted selves being different from the natural selves due to COVID-19 and the adjustments that companies made after that with remote working. Like someone who's high A or high B and really needs that person-to-person communication, how do they react? And are they very adjusted when they're working remotely?
Well, yeah. One of the things we responded to was we have a remote engagement report. how to better engage people. We had a lot of our clients reach out to us and say, okay, now the world's different. How do I engage them?
Yeah.
Because high B's, we like that element of face-to-face. I mean, Zoom or Teams or WebEx is okay, but we like that. And a lot was obviously denied during the shutdowns of the pandemic. So we had that to help engage people remotely. And it was hard, I mean, one of the things that my company, we've been remote since day one.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't a big culture shock for us to do it. However, what we did experience is because I have a lot of high B in my organization, we liked being face-to-face with the client, doing the live training. Well, we had to pivot. So our 2 pivots were to change the training format to a Zoom. So instead of having like a live 4-hour session, we'd break it down to a 2-hour session because we found that, it's the old adage, the mind can only absorb what the seat can endure. And then we did the remote engagement report.
Yeah.
And that was actually my director of IT came up with that idea. He says, we need to do this from his concept to delivery was 4 weeks.
Wow.
So because we had to respond, and a lot of our clients, I love getting it, when emails, thank you, the remote engagement really helped us during this tough time.
Yeah.
We appreciate the things that you do. Because it's really all about engaging people so that they could be happy, productive, and satisfied in their role.
And that's the goal, because then if they're productive, you're productive, the whole organization's productive, it just makes sense. Why not leverage this?
Well, as with anything, where do we spend, as business owners, where do we spend the majority of our time? With the problem children.
Yeah.
The good performers we don't have to worry about. So let's get more of our time back by getting rid of those. And, it could be I'm not a fit or I'm not properly managed and motivated. People accept goals differently. They accept instruction differently. Knowing how to do that the first time eliminates angst, not just for you, the business owner, but for your employees and your team as well.
Absolutely. And so now one thing I want to share, we just shared we did the natural self, the adjusted self, and now I want to show you another feature of the AcuMax here, which is the overlay feature. So you can take multiple people in your organization and you can overlay them and build a great team out that way, right, Jay? You can see where there's actually the whole graph with the 4 quadrants as well. But right now I'm going to bring up an overlay of me and one of my siblings. I'm not going to name who it is just because I haven't asked to share this. But here it is, anonymous. It's me and a sibling, and it's just very interesting. I'm the red, and the sibling is the green. And Jay, if you want to talk about this and we can get into this, it's just so interesting to me to be able to see, 2 people who came from the same people. It's like very different, right?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up. We know what chemicals drive that create the neural pathways for the A, the B, the C, and the D. But how they come together, we don't know. That's why you could have 2 blonde-haired, blue-eyed parents that have a dark-haired, dark-eyed child, or you can have, one sibling that's brown hair and brown eyes and another sibling with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah.
We understand recessive and dominant genes from a physical perspective, but why do they form it the way that they do? So yes, this is very common. And the overlay function is for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can take your team and you can overlay. Do I have a gap somewhere?
Yeah.
Because, when you have a team full of clone wiring patterns, we all like doing the same things. Things fall through the cracks. To have an effective team, you need a diversity of wiring. But diversity of wiring is the exact thing that creates team dysfunction.
Yeah.
Unless I know the value. So just with this overlay with Jake and the sibling, they're both high in the A. They both prefer their way of doing things best. Well, what can happen in meetings? Well, Jake wants to turn right, sibling wants to turn left, so there can be a lot of time with head banging. That 5-minute conversation, which should be a 5-minute conversation, becomes a 20-minute conversation.
Yeah.
Because Jake's trying to convince, his sibling of the brilliance of his way of doing it. His sibling is trying to convince Jake of the brilliance of his way of doing it. Okay. So you can see that that can create a potential clash. Now, the B drive, Jake is a verbal thinker. His sibling is an internal thinker. This creates issue too. Jake asks a question, gets the blank stare. Jake gets frustrated, repeats himself, which the sibling can't think. So, but here's the thing. Jake won't buy in unless he can verbalize it. Sibling won't buy in unless they can internalize it. But it's a graphic you can see. Go, okay, got it.
Now we know what that issue is. Like, what's the disconnect in this relationship? Oh, we don't know. Oh, there's Acumen. It's telling AcuMax tells you right there. I love it.
Absolutely. They're both low in the C. They like variety. They like juggling. The danger, though, is low Cs want to make quick decisions. So we want to make sure that if we have a team of low C, are we making the decision too quick?
You don't want to be too impulsive. Yeah, you need to balance it out.
Again, there's strengths and limitations, And the D drive, Jake's sibling likes good amounts of data and information in the decision-making process. Because Jake doesn't really prefer that, the tendency of low D is not to give as much information to the high D. The high D gets frustrated. Now, on the flip side, the tendency of the high D is to give TMI too much information to the low D. When a high D gives too much information to the low D, well, Jake, when somebody gives you too much information, what happens to you?
Cut to the chase. Let's go. You get impatient.
You get impatient.
Frustrated.
And the tendency is fog out at times.
Yeah.
So I understand in a visual, most people respond really well to visuals. We have lots of visuals in our system, and we do that for a reason. You can lay the entire team there. You can put people in and out. You can take a group of employees and create one amalgamated group profile so you know how to lay down goals, set objectives. That also provides data for creating position profiles for hiring. So, we're a hiring tool, but we also are an employee and company lifecycle tool. What are the positions we need to fill? How do I manage individuals? How do I resolve conflict? Jake and his sibling. There can be conflict from the A drive. There can be conflict from the B drive. There can be conflict from the D drive. And there can be a conflict from C when they're making decisions too quick. Jake might make his decision to turn right, sibling to turn left. I'm glad you're going to ask permission, but I do want to do one more little side point.
Yeah.
This information can be freely shared in organizations and workplaces. This is not covered under HIPAA law, and we encourage it. We encourage it because when you interact better, so now Jake knows his sibling. When he approaches him, he's going to say, okay, I have this idea, but he's going to know that his sibling is going to modify it a little bit to own it. Jake knows that he needs to give some degree of proven information and data. He needs to relay information quickly, and then lastly, allow his sibling time to think it through. What happens is the interaction improves. The sibling the same way. I'm going to present my idea. Jake's going to tweak it a little bit. I have to understand that Jake's going to want to verbalize it. I'm going to just give him the summary sheet. And because he wants more data, he'll ask for it. So it improves that interaction above and beyond. So it's the hiring, the onboarding, the motivating, the coaching, the building effective teams is key, conflict resolution. And then one last thing I do want to touch upon, career advancement. Oftentimes in organizations, we take a great worker, we put them in a supervisory role, and then they're unhappy and they leave, and we have two openings then. There are career routes for individuals. We had a client that right before they engaged with us, it was an IT firm, great developer. They thought, this guy's a great developer. We're going to make him the supervisor. Well, then after they engaged with him, one of the things after they promoted him, he never left his office. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He didn't want to engage with his people. Well, he was so very, very low in the B that creates elements of people and communication avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, we need our supervisors on. They got to talk to people. He won't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they can do some coaching, but they actually realigned it. And then finally they went back to him and said, would you rather just be a developer instead of a supervisor? The guy's like, man, I'm so glad you asked me that because I didn't like this. I didn't want to do it. And frankly, I was thinking about looking for another job.
Oh, wow.
So it gives us information on how to properly advance individuals within the organization to eliminate the Peter principle, to eliminate turnover. That happens all the time. Take a great worker, promote them to supervisor, then they leave, and I've got 2 holes in my organization.
Absolutely. And that makes sense. That really makes sense. And so I really hope that people take you up on the offer to text Jake to 218-517-7985. Take up Jay on this offer to do the AcuMax, because seriously, in 5 minutes, how long do these take on average?
Our average completion time is about 4.4 minutes.
So if you can, in 4.4 minutes, change the way you interact and hire and set up paths for ascension in someone's career, I mean, you can really optimize your business to a huge extent by leveraging this.
The only thing, when you take the AcuMax Index, now the link is just for the AcuMax, not for the Acumen, the cognitive skills. But when you take it, don't overthink it, just do it.
Be natural.
And that's the best way to get the best results possible. And again, depending on volume, it may take up between 5 and 10 minutes to get your results. When you do take it, you will get the 2 graphs: drive intensity, the explaining of like, want, need; effective engagement, the environment you best thrive within; your adjusted self graph; and a report, how to best interact with me. So you can start using some of these principles right away in better understanding yourself, and more importantly, how you interact with other people in your organization and your customers, and even in your personal life.
Absolutely. And that's huge to me as well, because now I hear all this and I'm reflecting back to, oh, wow, that's how I react to things. And this is why. And here's how I can, tweak that a little bit, be aware by reflecting on my natural wiring. So it just seems like you can improve yourself by being aware and reflecting on it. All right, Jay. So, wow, thank you so much. Is there anything else you think we should cover?
I think we've pretty much covered the gamut here in a short period of time. You may have to cut this podcast into 2 parts because there's so much in here.
Yeah.
But no, there's a good basics and a good understanding. You'll get your report. If you want any additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out. Always glad to answer questions. It may not be me, it may be one of my team, but we're all very competent. And the biggest thing is understanding, number one, who you are, and then how to improve interactions with other people, and then how to really improve your businesses by hiring, coaching, motivating the right way, and quickly resolving differences.
Absolutely. So, Jay, if someone does want to reach out to you and ask questions or ask for more information on this, what's the best way for them to reach you or your team?
Best way is to where you get the report email, support@AcuMax Index. That's the best way. And the reason being is I'm not always available, but one of our tenets of our company is to amaze our clients with great companies, with great client service every single day. So it goes in, and then available consultants can jump on it immediately and get back with you. So that's one of our tenets, and we live to it every single day. But support@AcuMaxIndex.com, AcuMaxIndex. And again, if you do it, you don't get your results in 10, 15 minutes, check your spam folder, but that's the best way to get back in touch with us.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I really appreciate it. I know the audience will appreciate it. And to anyone who's listened to this episode this far, I highly commend you, because I know this at the beginning of this episode, it's hard to kind of let everyone know and portray what we're going to talk about. This is something that you really need to see it to start to understand and believe it, and how you can apply it to your life and your business. So I appreciate everyone sticking with us. And Jay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the podcast, Jake. It's been my pleasure. I really enjoyed getting to meet you in Texas a few weeks ago, and I look to our future interactions and relationship.
Absolutely. Me as well. And Jay, we are absolutely going to have you come back on the podcast. I loved your stories. I loved hearing all about AcuMax. So I'd love to have you on again. And I'm sure the audience would love it as well.
Anytime you're ready, I'd be more than willing. Thanks. You're a great host. You made this a very easy podcast to do.
I try. We had a great conversation, and we'll be in touch after the show. So thank you very much, Jay. Thank you very much to our audience. And whether you're tuning in on Under Pressure or Inspection Pros, please stay tuned for the fantastic episodes we have coming up. And if you've listened to one of the podcasts but not the other, go check out the other ones, because although it's specific to an industry, we have industry influencers in each industry and experts in each coming on. There's a lot of great topics that really translate well to both industries. So go check out both. You can cross-pollinate and pull some episodes from each. And stay tuned for our fantastic lineup of guests coming on each podcast. We really have been so lucky with the fantastic interactions and engagement we've gotten from a lot of the experts and influencers in each field. So thank you very much to the audience, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss our next episode. This episode was produced by Jake Aronson. This has been a Pair Payments production.